Patrick Kelley, welcome to Tattooed Nerd. Hey, Patrick Kelley, distinguished architect at Zoom. I am not a spokesman for Zoom or a figurehead for Zoom. I just like to talk about cool technology, and a lot of times that deals with Zoom. And today, a special guest. I think this is pretty rare. I don't have a lot of special guests, but sometimes I invite people that are way smarter than me in some things, and that's why Craig is here. Craig, introduce yourself.
Yeah, great to be here, Patrick. Thank you. My name's Craig. I'm one of the solutions engineers here at Zoom, and I'm part of the EMEA team, and I serve in the UK and Ireland market primarily. My focus is purely on the phone, Zoom Phone, and Zoom Contact Center.
Well, that leads into an amazing segue because CRM is a big part of the Zoom Phone integration story. We do it with Dynamics 365 if you're a Microsoft customer, but I think they're only 8% of the CRM market. I've done a video with Jason on our phone team, and we did HubSpot, which is more targeted toward SMB and mid market. But let's talk about the heavy hitter. I think Salesforce has 43% of the CRM market out there, so the majority of people are using Salesforce as their CRM, but you're here today to demo the Zoom Phone integration with CRM and Salesforce. Am I right or wrong? Please say I'm right.
You are right. Yes, absolutely.
Well, what I'd like to do, if it's possible, is I would love for you to be able to show everyone what that Salesforce integration looks like from a Zoom Phone perspective, and show them like the day in the life of a salesperson, like making a call, like receiving a call. If you could show us that, and you'll notice that for Zoomtopia, I have the purple going. That would be fantastic if you could maybe demo that for us.
Absolutely. Let me share my screen, and then we'll talk through it. So here we go. Right. Well, I suppose a quick thing to mention here is that the integration that we're looking at here is one of the many different integrations that are available off the shelf within our marketplace. So if you go here to marketplace.zoom.us, search for Salesforce, and you'll find this plugin along with the documentation that you need to deploy this. But it's very simple to deploy. But what I'd like to do is as we run through this and have a look, keep a few things in mind. Some of the main things, the main themes, I suppose you might say, that I want to cover during this demo here is why is this important? So the first thing really is we find that the customers who use Salesforce, the users who use Salesforce, they spend a lot of time in Salesforce.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They're using it throughout the day. They're doing the primary activities of their job. A lot of that is happening inside Salesforce. So if that user wants to interact with the phone system for any reason, then we can help them to do that without having to leave that application.
Right.
So for them, it improves things like focus, productivity, all those good things that we talk about. We can help them to be able to manage their telephony experience right there from the Salesforce window. And you'll see that when you've installed this plugin, what you get on the bottom left-hand side is access to as it's referred to, a soft phone inside the Salesforce interface.
So let me get this straight. So is there two parts of this integration? There is the plugin integration to the browser itself, right? And then there's the app part of that from the Zoom marketplace, right?
Correct. Yeah. And what that comes as is it's in the format of an app that sits within the Salesforce App Exchange.
Okay.
So you can access it from our marketplace, but ultimately what it will do is it will take you into the Salesforce environment, and you can download and install that from the Salesforce App Exchange.
And you only have to do that once, right? And then you're done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Correct. So that's the first thing is giving people access to the tools that they need to do their job from inside the application where they live throughout the day. The second thing is, if we think about what happens when we receive a call. So when we receive a call from a customer, what do? Typically, we would go into our CRM and find that customer to be able to interact with the customer and the records within our database. So we can take the heavy lifting out of that by automating that process, so the agent doesn't have to manually search for the customer they're talking to. if we can identify the telephone number of the caller, we can open up the details of the customer automatically in front of them, so the user doesn't have to do that.
Right.
Okay, so again, thinking about efficiencies, making life easier, and also from a customer's perspective, improving the customer experience, because they're not having to wait for the user, the person they're talking to, the contact within the company that they've contacted, to be able to find them and locate them within the CRM.
Well, and that's the great thing too, is that it creates that stickiness, right? That application affinity. I think even Harvard Business Review came out last month and had a study that said the average knowledge worker clicks between applications up to 1,200 times a day, losing 9% of their productivity. And this is exactly what Zoom is trying to create, is this less contact switching, and allows that salesperson whose job is to sell stuff, right? And earn a commission and earn revenue for the company, to stay in that tool most of the time, so they don't have to keep clicking in and out of that.
Exactly. Yeah. So we can improve that whole process and make life a lot easier for them as a result. So that's the second thing, and we're going to go through these in practice in a moment. And the final thing, the third thing, is that when we're having our conversations with our customers, when we're talking to them about products, when we're closing deals, we're selling things to them, and those kind of things, generating revenue for the business, we can capture all the information about those calls, when they happened, who they happened with, how long were those conversations,
Yep.
the recordings of those conversations as well. And we can capture all that information and store it within the Salesforce CRM.
Correct. Yep. Perfect.
And that's important from the user's perspective, because it means that when they're interacting with a customer, they've got a holistic view of previous interactions that we've had with them. So some really deep insights into what those previous conversations were and what they included. And also from a management perspective, being able to use Salesforce to report on those interactions and who's having them, who they're talking to, what were the outcomes of those conversations, and so on.
Right. Yeah, and this allows record keeping, right? Where we can really look at our Salesforce data, like graphically, right from, again, inside of this application without ever having to leave.
Exactly right. And we'll look at all three of these things as we go through the demo now. So
perfect.
So the first thing, as I mentioned earlier, is that we have access to our telephony experience embedded inside the Salesforce window, and we can access it from this pop-up here on the bottom left-hand side. And if we want to, we can leave this embedded within the Salesforce window, but if we prefer, we can also have this as more of a floating window on our desktop. Okay, so we've got some flexibility of how we want this to be presented.
Gotcha.
Personally, I like it just embedded here within the window, because it's not another window that I need to manage.
Mm-hmm.
And from here, we can change the number. So if we want to make an outbound call to somebody, then we have the ability to select, just like we do in Zoom Phone. If you're familiar with Zoom Phone, we have the same capability here within the client natively. We can change the number. So if we want to appear to our customer as from a specific team, maybe the sales team, or we want to maybe hide our number, for example, then we can do that from the Salesforce window.
Gotcha.
And we've got a familiar keypad. We all know what that's for. But here we can search for contacts by name. So here what we're doing is we're searching for our Salesforce contacts. So if we keep our customers here within Salesforce, if we want to call any of those customers, we can simply search for them by name and call them that way.
Perfect.
Okay. But equally, we can also, let's say we're dialing someone for the first time, we can just dial a number, and I can call that number by clicking the blue icon.
Yep.
And what that will do is it will automatically dial using Zoom Phone.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's
very seamless. Yeah.
And I've done that without leaving the Salesforce window. Again, right. So just to reiterate on that point, if I'm spending a lot of time in Salesforce, I haven't had to leave my application in order to do that.
Yep, absolutely.
So what's happened here then? We've contacted someone, and Salesforce has identified for us automatically that this is somebody we haven't interacted with before. We haven't got their contact details. So this could be a new customer that we're dealing with. So automatically, it's given me a pop-up to say, let's capture the information about this potential customer.
Right.
So what I'll do is I'll just put some details in here. So I'm going to put John Smith, let's say. And we want to use this telephone number to take country code out at this point. And I hit save. So we've now identified who we're talking to, and this has now been saved for us in Salesforce as a new contact.
Right. Yep.
Okay. And if we take our focus back to the plugin here, what you'll see is that while we're on the phone to somebody, our call control, the most important call control capabilities that we need, hang up, mute, unmute, hold, and access to our call recording are all available here within the plugin.
That's great.
So again, not having to flip over to another application if we want to place a call on hold, if we want to hang up the call, we can do that from the plugin.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
But if we look underneath that, what the plugin is allowing us to do now is capture information about this call, which we can then store within the Salesforce record. And you'll see here, we've got some default fields that we have access to, including comments. So I can put here, new customer, potential lead. Let's speak to them again soon. Okay, so we can capture some information about this call. So this could be what the conversation was about, what the result of the conversation was. But this information is really useful because when we store this within Salesforce, it means that other people can look back on these conversations and see what the content was.
Sure.
We can also provide some other fields here. You'll notice I've got one here called call outcome. So this is where we can assign some kind of outcome to this call. What was the result of it?
Yep.
And I'm going to say this was a new customer we were talking to. Okay. So now I'm going to go up and clear this call down. We finished talking to this customer now. We've got a new contact stored within Salesforce. And I'm just going to go down and save my call log. And now if I were to refresh this contact page, you'll see down here on the bottom right that our plugin, with the help of Salesforce here, has saved an activity against this record.
Yeah.
Now, if I click on this, we can see all the details relating to the call. We can see who had the call, the comments that were entered into the plugin. So we know what the conversation was about. We know how long the conversation was. We know what the outcome of the conversation was based on the call outcome code that we attached. And we've got access to the recording. If the call was recorded and I have permission to listen to the recording, then we can listen to that from here. Again, we don't have to go into another application to do that. Everything happens here within Salesforce.
Yeah, this is great because I mean it saves time for everyone involved because the salesperson doesn't make money updating records, right? The salesperson makes money talking to people.
Yes, indeed. And this is why the technology is there to make their lives easier and automate some of that process. Okay, good. So we've stored this call. We've got our new customer now. We've captured their details in a contact. And if I just go back here to my contact record, the other thing you'll notice is that the phone number here that we've captured now turns into a link. So earlier, I contacted this customer by entering their number here manually into the plugin.
Right.
But now if I subsequently want to make another call to this customer, all I need to do is find their contact, click on their number, and now we have this concept of click to dial.
Yep. Perfect.
So again, to your point, Patrick, what you're saying earlier is keeping people focused on the task at hand and not worrying about the technology. Previously, I would have had to have found this telephone number, flipped over to my Zoom phone client, typed the number in and dialed.
Right.
I've automated that process now, simple click to dial.
Yeah, and this is great because this is just one person that you're talking to throughout the day, right? You're going to be talking to 10, 20, 30 people depending on your role, and you're saving literally excrement amount of time by doing it this way and having that record right at hand and that click to call ability built right into the platform. It's fantastic demo.
Yeah, and that adds up. That really does add up over time. If you analyze the time it takes to do that and you multiply that, like say, by the number of calls you're making in a day, that's a significant amount of time over a longer period.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the power. Again, the power of one, the Zoom app marketplace integration or extensibility, and then the power of Salesforce to integrate with that. Just really for anybody that's a CRM customer at Salesforce, really taking advantage of this application. It's fantastic.
So here we are again in our plugin, in our kind of fictitious customer journey here. So we've spoken to the customer, we've captured their details. We've now made it easy for someone to subsequently call them back.
Yeah.
And again, we are invited now to enter some details about this call. Notice here, we can also relate it to something else, some other object within Salesforce. So for example, maybe I want to relate this call not just to this contact, but maybe I want to relate it to an account object within
Mhm.
Salesforce. So let's
Right.
say it's to do with this company here, Edge Communications, for example. So we're associating this particular contact record, this activity, sorry, with a contact and an account. We'll see what that looks like in a second. But here, maybe we say called customer back. They have placed an order for 10 times widget XYZ, right?
Yeah.
So they've now bought something from us. Brilliant. So we've captured that detail. And again, what we're doing here is we're capturing the nature of this call, information about this call, which is useful to look back on. We can assign outcomes. So I'll say here that they've placed an order and we finish that call and we move on to the next.
Perfect.
Let me close that down. And now again, if I refresh the page, we'll see that that information has been captured again within an activity. Now we can see it's an outbound call to this number. We've also associated it with an account. And if I look at this, we've got the comments. We know exactly what the nature of the conversation was. We know who had the conversation.
Yep.
We know what the outcome was. And not only that, we can listen to the recording of this order being placed.
Right. Right.
So we've got a record of it.
This is fantastic.
So let's go back to our contact and let's go back to the homepage, in fact. So what happens now if this customer calls us? So if you remember, the second thing that we talked about was identifying someone automatically when they call us. One, so the user doesn't have to.
Hmm.
So it's, again, speeding up that workflow, making them more efficient as a result. But secondly, to improve the customer experience as well, because they're not having to explain who they are and wait for the user to go ahead and search for them within the CRM. So let's say our customer calls us back. So we've got an incoming call coming in.
Perfect.
Okay, here comes the call.
I recognize John's name already.
And here we've recognized that John has called us. And there we go. So John Smith has called us. But notice that what's happened here is I haven't had to search for them manually. So
Right.
number one, the plugin has identified who we're talking to, but Salesforce has automatically opened the contact in front of me, so I don't have to do that.
Perfect. Yep.
So now I know I'm now interacting with John, and as a user, which might be someone else speaking to John now. So maybe I spoke to him the first time, but Patrick, perhaps you take the next inbound call from this customer. But it doesn't matter because you've got a full information here, access to the previous activities that have been entered against this contact.
Right.
So if this customer calls back to talk about the order that they recently placed, I can see by looking at this activity record, I can say, oh yes, John, I can see who you spoke to. I can see that you ordered 10 of widget XYZ. And if I need it, I as a user, and assuming I've got permission to listen to the recording, of course,
Right.
I can even listen to that conversation live to figure out what was said on that call between the previous sales representative and the customer, John Smith.
Yeah, and this, I mean, this literally increases efficiency for the entire company because let's be honest, a lot of times you're not the sole salesperson for the sole account for the history of that account, right? You're going to have a revolving door of account executives that are being part of it, and to have a historical perspective on exactly what happened, exactly what transpired during those past phone conversations really speeds up the efficiency of the overall communication between that customer and any salesperson associated with it.
Exactly, exactly. And again, just to kind of labor on the point, is that I'm doing this from inside Salesforce. I'm not having to flip over to some other call reporting tool
Yep.
or even the Zoom management interface. I can do it from the tool that I use all the time.
Yeah, really, really good job on this integration. It's actually above and beyond what other CRM are capable of. Like even like the two I mentioned earlier, Dynamics 365 and HubSpot. I don't think their integration is as clean as this one as of yet.
This is a very, very tight integration. And in a minute, we'll have a look at some of the reporting capabilities as well, because all of this data that we're capturing, we're talking about it in terms of how it relates to the salesperson, for example, or the user within the organization and the customer experience, but there's also the management element to it as well. How can we leverage this data to start looking at performance metrics and kind of the activity within the sales organization?
Yep.
So again, let's capture some information. So customer called to speak about their recent order, spell that correctly. And what was the outcome? They had a product query. Finish that call and we'll close it down. And again, let me refresh my page here. But you'll see now that we are starting to build up a rich history
Sure.
of our interactions with this customer.
Right. Right.
And it's all been stored against the contact. So there's a lot of insight to be gained here from users who are interacting with customers if we start to track some of this information. So we have um, all the history of previous conversations that have taken place.
Yeah, and that's I mean that's important obviously for the account executive or salesperson to reference, but it's also, and I think you're going to segue into this in a minute. It's also important to the people that are understanding pipeline and response and activity of a certain account, and either why sales are lagging or why sales are increasing, and it probably directly goes back to these metrics that you're collecting.
Absolutely, and also another thing to point out here is that these are, although they were created by the Zoom Phone integration, these are Salesforce objects. So
Mm,
you'll see here that with these various objects that we create, we also have access to Salesforce capabilities. For example, creating some kind of follow-up event based on the information in this task.
nice, right?
So that we might send this along with a reminder to one of our colleagues with some information about this particular call. But these are no more than standard Salesforce objects, and we can leverage those in the way that you're already familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's man, this I was aware we had integration. I was not aware it was literally this powerful.
Absolutely, and you know that we're seeing lots of customers using this with a great deal of success as well. Absolutely.
Well, it's good because as the biggest CRM solution in the really in every single level, mainly enterprise, I understand why it's such a powerful tool, and to leverage then the power of Zoom Phone, it's bringing like two giants together to really help salespeople do their job.
So let's take a look at how we can leverage this data now, and I'll give you some examples in the form of reports. I've actually created a report already, which we can take a look at, just to give you an example of how you can, or how maybe a manager or a team leader might use this data. But here within Salesforce, we can produce standard Salesforce reports and draw upon the data that we're storing on those calls.
Yeah.
So here I've created a just one here called Zoom Phone Call Report. And if I go into this, there's a couple of different elements to this report. I mean, it's a fairly straightforward report, but basically what I'm doing here is I'm drawing upon those Zoom call logs and producing a table here at the bottom of all the calls that have been made or received by me in this case. Although I could,
Hmm.
I could, if I was a manager, for example, I'd probably widen this out to the people within my team, so
Sure.
I can start to monitor their activities. But this is basically a list of calls that I've made today, made or received, I should say, and I've got the information about the task. So if I want to, I can go to any of these calls and click on the subject line here, and it will take me straight to the task that was created by the plugin, where again I can view all of the details relating to that call and listen to the recording.
Yep.
So if as a manager you want to quickly look at the details of those calls, it's no more than a mouse click away.
Yeah.
I've also got the caller's telephone number, the number that they dialed. I've got access to the comments as well. I've got a comments field in here. So along with the information about the call, I can also see the comments that are associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
And up here, I've used, again, this is just a standard Salesforce capability. I've grouped this report by the outcome, the call outcome, and I can see of the calls that I've made and received. And again, you can do this on a per user basis. If you were, let's say, a team leader who was looking after a particular sales organization, for example,
Right.
I can now see of the 19 calls that I've had today, I can see that 3 of those were to new customers. That represents 15% of my day. I can see that 4 of those actually resulted in an order being placed. I can see that I spoke to one person who was actually a wrong number.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. But you see now that how we can leverage all of those data points to start building a picture of now the performance of my sales organization as a result.
Well, I mean, I think Salesforce, if you're familiar with them at all from our audience, you know that a major part of their solution is business intelligence and analytics, right? And the majority of people in enterprises today that are making outbound calls are probably on the side of salespeople, and that's probably obviously goes directly related to your revenue that you're generating. And so every single salesperson, every single team lead, every single account executive and CRO, these are vital numbers to understand for the success of your company.
Absolutely, yeah. And we can provide all of that data is happening, it's being built kind of organically, I suppose you might
Mm-hmm.
say, in terms of
Yeah.
when you start using the application, immediately you'll start building that that intelligence and that data in the background. As soon as you start logging calls, attaching notes to them, attaching the recordings to them, all of that data is being collected in the background. So you'll start seeing the benefit of that straight away.
I know a lot of salespeople, Craig, just like you know a lot of salespeople, because that's pretty much our job is to support them in their endeavors. And I think if you're a salesperson, I think the one thing that they hate the most is the work before and after that call, right? Is that records keeping, that updated management, that's probably the worst part of their job is because that's not making them money. That phone call is making them money. And this really just makes it immensely easier for them to be successful.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just to kind of recap on the things that we talked about again is that we can help people to be more efficient by keeping them in the tools that they use all of the time. If they need to interact with the phone system for any reason, then they can do that from where they are. We can help them to speed up workflows by automatically giving them access to things like capturing contact details or a screen pop to show them exactly who they're speaking to so they don't have to find it themselves. And then we can capture all the data about those conversations. We can store them within the CRM and allow people to either look back on those conversations and also report on them.
Well, Craig, well, one, thank you for being brave enough to come on the show. Do you call it a show? I always wondered if I should be call it a show. It's more, I just really trying to educate people on what the power of Zoom is. And I've been wanting to do this one for a long time. And I've just never had the time or honestly, the horsepower to do it because all this you work this that you showed us, that's pre-work that you did to set up this environment to make it look like a demo account. That takes a lot of effort, and so thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for showing us all these amazing demos, and thank you for really describing them perfectly for a salesperson or somebody that's looking to see what Zoom Phone and Salesforce integration look like.
You're very welcome, Patrick. Yeah, a pleasure.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. I'm sure you have a lot more sales calls to make and AEs to help. But one thing I think you helped immensely with is that now we can use this demo to show all of our customers, and you don't have to do it live anymore. So you've saved yourself probably a lot of work there too.
Excellent.
Enjoy your day, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.